So maybe kind of get started here. Okay. So last week we hit this how question. How does knowing the character of God give us a common context for the gospel? And we looked at how God has revealed himself to man, general revelation in creation, through the whole Jewish experience, and then through the gospel itself. And I found it particularly interesting that the gospel itself reveals the two sides of God, the righteousness of God and also the wrath of God. And of course, the wrath is pulled out on the cross. That's why there's death and burial. And then his righteousness is made new, made fresh through the resurrection. Then we talked about this exchange that man has made. He exchanges the glory of God for his own glory, the majesty of the Creator with his creation. And Paul hints at the exchange that God will make in the gospel, the exchange that will undo the exchange that man has made. And then finally, we talked about this oneness, that there's no distinction between Jew and Gentile, but there is a distinction in that God is fair and that he applies the law to the Jews, but general revelation, general law to the Gentiles. And Paul is speaking he's speaking to both Jews and Gentiles, and we've seen how their histories will impact on their idea of this glorious promised future that Paul is laying out here. There is an us, and there is a them, and that dynamic is within the church. And the Jews are, after all, God's chosen people, right? So they have this history of God's revelation, and they have the law. But Paul says, while all that's true, something else is here which surpasses that. And that leads us into this question. How does the gospel fulfill that law? How does it extend it? How does it supersede it? How does it fulfill everything that was promised before? Paul will have a lot to say to the Jews who are under the law, that is the law given at Sinai. And the Jews cannot be saved through the law. The Gentiles are not subject to the law. Then why did God provide it? The Jews have the law directly revealed to Moses from God. An obvious question then is its purpose, and Paul will now address that purpose. But before we jump into this, let's go back to Acts 15. We didn't actually read that because I got too long-winded, so I summed it up. But Peter testifies that the Spirit has been poured out even to the Gentiles. And Paul also shares his ministry and the response of the Gentiles and the working of God in them, just as he did with Jewish believers. But that testimony was not without conflict and not without objection. And we did not read all of Acts 15, but this was the primary objection in response to both Peter and Paul's testimony about presenting the gospel to the Jews. And you'll find this in Acts 15. Then some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees, these are believers now, but they belong to the party of the Pharisees. They have the same view of the law that the Pharisees had. The Gentiles must be circumcised and are required to keep the law. And that was their objection. That was their objection to Peter and Paul testifying that the Gentiles responded. God responded to them. God poured out his Spirit on them through faith in Christ alone. And those were the two objections. They have to be circumcised and they have to keep the law. So here's our first question for the day. Where is circumcision introduced?
Biblically?
Yes.
Way back then.
Okay, in the Old Testament, I get a little more specific.
Was it back in Genesis?
Well, we're getting closer.
How about Exodus?
Which Abraham?
Yeah, it goes back to Abraham.
Abraham.
It goes back to Abraham, and so we got a ringer. You know, I had to invite him this week. We needed somebody who knew the answers. Second,
I am teachable.
there you go. Well, we are too, we hope. And then the second question is, now that we know where it was in Genesis through Abraham. Why was it introduced? Why did God introduce this? Is sacrament the right word? This practice of circumcision. Why was it introduced? We're gonna see if the other class can answer, but I know you know the answer because you're our ringer.
Identity.
As a form of identity.
Separation.
From?
To make unique, set apart, holy.
Yeah, part of the chosenness, part of the distinction of the Jews. Okay, which is interesting. It comes up in the Jew and Gentile. That distinction is still there. They're them. They're not us. Okay, now.
I was just going to say, he wanted to show the world that they were his chosen people. They were set apart.
Yeah, they were set apart.
Different from the rest of the world.
Okay, so let's go back to let's go back to Genesis and kind of read about this, because I think once we understand these two questions, where was it introduced and why was it introduced, when we get to where Paul talks about circumcision in Romans, circumcision of the heart, I hope it'll just make, oh, that's why he's talking about it in those way, in that language. So here we go. And Cindy, you want to go ahead and start, please? This is Genesis 17, 1 and 2.
When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. Then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers.
Okay, so you're all familiar with Genesis and you're all familiar with the call of Abraham. So if you go back to chapter 12, Abraham is called. He's called from the land of Ur, and he says, come follow me. Or he doesn't say, come follow me. He says, go to the land I will show you. And if you read Hebrews 11, it talks about that Abraham responded in faith, not knowing where he was to go. He didn't know how he was to be provided for. He didn't know what God's plan was. All he knew was there was a promise. And he was called to leave one place and go to another place. Then if you go to chapter 15 in Romans, Abraham says, I am an old man and you promised me all of these people and this inheritance, and I am not having any kids. So and God says, let me confirm the promise. And it has this scene where the animals are separated and God walks through the animals to confirm that promise, that contract, if you will, with Abram. And then, interestingly enough, I'm a slide ahead of myself. This is the Hebrews 11 verse. Back to that. Then what happens in 16 is Abraham tries to work it out himself. And so Sarah says, go into my maidservant, Hagar. And so he does. And Ishmael's born. And now we get to Genesis 17. He still doesn't have a child from Sarah, but he does have a child working it out himself through Hagar. And God reminds him, no, I want you to walk before me faithfully and blameless. And walking before me implies to me a couple of things. One is, don't go your own way. Go with me. Go before me. And it also conveys this sense of authority. Go before me because I'm directing your path. Go before me because I'm the authority here. I'm the one that you are today. And he's walking where he still doesn't know exactly what God's calling him to. He has this promise. He's reacting to the promise, but he still doesn't know. And so there's a faith involved. And he says, no, go before me and walk faithfully with faith. Trust me. And then as you're doing that, be blameless. So there's a righteousness part of that as well. These are all three things that we see in Romans the authority of God, the righteousness of God, and faith. All three of those are key themes in Romans. Then I will make a covenant between me and you, and will greatly increase your numbers. And that's God's role. That's the covenant piece of God's role. It's unbreakable contract. He swore to it in chapter 15, walking through the split animals. And that promise will be kept. I will be faithful as well. And you will prosper, increase, and inherit. That's part of the promises. And so we'll continue here.
Abram fell face down, and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I've made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenants as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God."
I highlighted that one phrase. And we've read this in scripture, and I know I'm going to ask you here in a minute for a couple of examples, but I know you're going to be able to name them. That there is a name change from Abram to Abraham. And what that represents is really a change of character. There's a physical name change, but it's really a spiritual reality that's happening. You are Abram from Ur, and now you're going to be Abraham, and the father of this chosen people. There's a spiritual reality that's happening here because of your faith in following me. And you see this in other places. Where else in Scripture have you seen name changes?
Well, Sarah.
Sarah to Sarai, or Sarai to Sarah.
Saul.
Peter, Simon to Peter, Saul to Paul. We read in Isaiah when he's talking about the redemption of Israel, he says, "And you'll be called by a new name. No longer you'll be deserted or desolate, but you'll be Hephzibah and Beulah." The name change represents a physical, spiritual reality that God's at work, changing you from something to something else, and that change is represented by that name. Okay, let's continue back in 17.
Then God said to Abraham, "As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you."
It's not the covenant itself, is it?
It's a sign.
No, it's a sign. It's an indicator. It's a reminder. It's a physical, visible reminder. And it's a reminder for Abraham to do what? Well, to walk under God's authority blamelessly and in faith. And he would be reminded of that daily. It's something that's a physical reference, but it represents the spiritual change that happens. But the way I read that, and boy, it sure sounds like a command to me, doesn't it? All forever do this. And I think that's what the Pharisees are trying to align with. God has commanded this, and therefore these Gentiles that come to faith, they have to do it too. But the question then is, why shouldn't the Gentiles be baptized or be circumcised? How would you answer that question? Because it's posed to you now.
Well, they're under a new covenant.
And the new covenant is
Christ.
Yeah. This applies to, you talk about separation, you talked about chosen people. This to those physical descendants of Abraham. But the new covenant is not a covenant of descendancy. It's a covenant of faith. And so there will be a new sign, a new indicator, a new reminder.
And all the Gentiles said, phew.
Yeah, and Cindy said new covenant, so we're going to go right there. This is what Jesus says that, of course, we say this at communion all the time. This is the blood of my covenant. And then in Hebrews, it's a new covenant. Remember Jeff's sermon on better than, where he went through Hebrews? The superior covenant transcends it. It goes beyond it. It's deeper. It represents not just this physical thing of this people through whom I revealed myself, but now this spiritual reality that we now have, this covenant relationship we now have through faith. And then Paul writes in 2 Corinthians that we're ministers of that new covenant. Not the letter, not the law, not the written, not the physical, but the spiritual. The letter kills because we're all condemned by the law. But the Spirit gives life. And this is this new covenant, this better covenant, and it will have a new symbol. Back to Romans.
Now, if you call yourself a Jew, if you only rely on the law and boast in God, if you know his will and approve of what is superior because you are instructed by the law, if you are convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those who are in the dark, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of little children, because you have in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth.
See how he's setting them up? You think you're special because you're chosen. You think you're special because you have the law. You think you're special because you have this covenant sign, this reminder, this circumcision. You call yourself a Jew and you think that means something. It's something valuable, something important. He's setting up this thing. And if you're a Jew, what does the law really represent? You have the law. That's what makes you distinct. That's what makes you us. What is it about the law? What does it represent?
They have faith in the law. That is their faith.
Okay. That's what they hold to. That's what they trust in. That's what they believe in. That's what the psalmist calls, that's the stumbling block for the Jews because they're trusting in their own righteousness. But what else does it represent? We've talked about it.
It was their original covenant. I mean,
And it's not for everybody.
right.
It's just for the Jews, right? It's not for the Gentiles. It's the us. We're the us. We're special. We're chosen. We're God's holy people, right? So that's what it represents. And it becomes a barrier to the others because you're not one of us. You're them. So it's a barrier. It also, it's a protection from the riffraff. We're chosen. Let's continue. Where do they actually boast? If you call yourself a Jew, if you rely on the law and boast in God, what is the boast?
They have God.
That they have God. He chose us. We're special. We're unique. We're different than. We're not them. He's setting them up because he's going to take them down here in just a minute. But he's setting them up. You think you have this. You think this is what it's about. And then he continues.
You then, who teach others, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that people should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? As it is written, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you.
You look at those questions and you're a God-fearing Jew. You would answer every one of those questions. Yes or no? How would you answer those? Do you teach yourself? Oh, yes. Yes, I study the law every day. It's a light to my path. If you preach against stealing, do you steal? Oh, no, I would never do that. I fulfill the law. I'm righteous under the law. Paul boasts about, as to the law, he's blameless. People shouldn't commit adultery. Do you commit adultery? Of course not. And then the kicker, then why is God's name blasphemed among the Gentiles? Because of you. If you're all of that, why this? If you think the law is your salvation, you think the law is what you can boast in, then why is God's name blasphemed? Because read your history. That's what he's getting to. Read your history. You're not all that. This is in chapter 2. We know when we get to chapter 3, it's all of sin, fall short of the glory of God. That's where he's building towards. But what he has to do first is saying, you think you're special because you're chosen. You think you're special because, Abraham's your father. You think you're special because you have the law. But no, you're as guilty as them that are out there. Next.
Want me to read?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Circumcision has value if you observe the law, but if you break the law, you have become as though you had not been circumcised. So then, if those who are not circumcised keep the law's requirements, will they not be regarded as though they were circumcised? The one who is not circumcised physically and yet obeys the law will condemn you, who, even though you have the written code of circumcision, are a lawbreaker.
Yeah. So the circumcision was a sign of the covenant, a reminder. It isn't the saving thing. It isn't the thing that makes you special. It isn't the thing that makes you chosen. It's a reminder of this covenant that you have. But if a Gentile does everything that the law tells you to do, and he does it faithfully, don't you consider him one of you? And what about a Jew who has the sign of the covenant, who is circumcised, but disobeys it? Do you still consider him chosen and one of you? He's setting up this contrast. What is this circumcision? Why does it matter? Does it matter? It doesn't matter because it has nothing to do with the actual living out the life. It's only a sign, a reminder of the covenant that's already there. Next.
Person is not a Jew who is one only. Sorry,
My head in the way?
that was my eyes changing.
Okay.
Nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from other people, but from God.
And now it gets to the heart of it. This sign, this reminder, really should be reflecting not the physical thing, this physical descendancy from Abraham where there's a covenant, but it really reflects the spiritual condition. And if in fact we are in faith and we come to Christ and we receive the Spirit, then we have this reminder, this sign on our hearts. That's where the reminder is. It's the spiritual reality that actually happens. It's the indicator that we are part of this new covenant that Jesus brought through the gospel. And it's not by this written law, which you all have violated. No, this is something new. This is something by faith. I'm ready to start singing the song.
I know, I love the song.
I know. That's what
I like the guy
I know. As new covenant, we will read it is this exchange God will promise that we will have the righteousness of God through faith, and the covenant will fulfill what the old covenant pointed to. a promise from God, evidenced by a sign as we walk blamelessly under his authority. Now, I'm going to take a little side trip, just because I think this is really interesting. Just kind of review what we kind of already talked about. Genesis 12, promises made, Abraham responds in faith. We kind of read Hebrews 11:8 for that. And then in Genesis 15, Abraham doubts. God says, I'm going to reassure you. And he has the walking through the animals scene. And then you get to Genesis 16. Abraham doubts and decides to impregnate Hagar, and Ishmael's born. And then you get to Genesis 17, and God reiterates this promise, and all males are circumcised, and he sets this sign of this new covenant, the covenant that he has. Now, what's interesting is Abraham is circumcised. All of the males in his household, servants and slaves that are there, they're circumcised. And Ishmael is circumcised. So everyone in the household is circumcised. But the covenant is not with Ishmael. The covenant is actually with Isaac. And I got to thinking about that. Why? Ishmael is the result of Abraham trying to work out his own salvation, his own promise, fulfilling the promise. Isaac is the one that when you wait for God and trust in God and wait for God to faithfully deliver on his promises, that's the point. That's what he's pointing to. It's this faith. If you have faith in me, even though you're an old man, even though Sarah is an old woman, you will have descendants and you will have many nations. And it won't just be the chosen people that are your physical descendants, but you're also going to be a father of faith, and that will include the Gentiles as well. And Paul will make that argument in Romans here in a minute. That covenant is for faith, not for our actions. And that's why the circumcision is now not a physical one. It represents a spiritual reality, our faith reality. And that's why it's circumcised on our heart. Okay. I tried to answer this question. How does God fulfill the law? And we use this objection to start it with. And then the us and them argument that the Jews might have had. And Paul makes this distinction that no, something better, something surpassing, something that transcends the law and the covenant is now here. It's a new covenant. It's a new covenant in Christ's blood, and it's a new covenant through faith. And that is that also has a sign, the sign of circumcision. But here's a couple of questions for us. Does the church today, or individual believers, cling to things other than the gospel to save them?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So jump in there and tell me one of those. What
They
do
cling
we
to
think
money.
saves us? Huh?
They cling to money.
They cling to money
They cling
because
to
money
their-
provides
Security.
security.
Yeah.
It provides our future.
They cling to their identity, their own identity, not what God gives them.
Right.
Can
What
I branch out a little bit?
You can.
The only reason I know this is because my sister became a Catholic after years of not being a Catholic. And now she's clinging to things like the saints, the Mother Mary, and all of that stuff.
Right.
Not to God.
The rituals or the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rituals,
The
traditions.
rules.
What you practice in your life and what you do not practice in your life.
Oh, so following a set of rules.
Yes.
What's that called? Legalism.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Have you ever been involved or have people involved in a church that are very legalistic?
Mhm.
You know, don't dance, drink, or chew, or go with girls that do.
Mhm.
That kind of thing. Does that save you? No. Is that right living? Probably. But that's not salvation.
Right.
Yeah. Salvation is by faith and faith alone. Okay.
Joining a church.
Joining a church. Yeah, right. That doesn't save you either.
Doing good works.
Yeah, doing good works.
How many times do you hear the phrase, well, I'm living my life, I hope the good outweighs.
Yeah.
I'm a good
I-
person.
Yes.
I hope God grades on a curve.
Yeah.
He doesn't grade on a curve.
No,
No,
it's pass fail, isn't it?
that's right.
I have
right,
to
don't-
say, I was very freaked out last week after we left because of the whole wrath concept. When we've been teaching love and peace and all that good stuff, and it's like, wrath, oh my gosh.
Well, that's what the cross is all about, though.
I know.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about that.
So here's one that's maybe a little more personal. How does understanding what Paul says here in this section point us to reevaluate our preconditions for believers?
Okay, so clarify, when you say preconditions for new believers, are you saying preconditions before they become a believer?
No,
Before they
No.
come?
someone says to you, says, I've accepted Christ. So,
We think we have conditions. Do we impose that on the new believer?
Yeah.
They are LGBTQ, whatever, pick your letter. Do we treat them somehow because we're us and they're them? Is that
yeah,
what
I
you're
know
thinking about?
exactly it. That's a great example. How about someone that maybe has a different view of Revelation? You know, do they have to now line up theologically with us? They're a new believer. Do we impose our understanding and not just accept them because through faith they've been saved? That's kind of where the question goes.
God is the judge, not us.
But
I was going to say, theory, practice.
That's how I have to do, like, just justify it in my head, though,
Right.
because you can't change
Right.
minds and stuff like that.
Right.
And you can live a life that is faithful and be an example, and
Right.
you can do everything you can do, but it's up to them ultimately. I mean,
Do you remember the time that you sat next to that kid and he was in back of me and he looked different?
oh yeah,
And I'm like, very guarded, very aware. I mean, I'm judging.
Right.
And I have breakfast with her and I'm telling her about this guy and she goes, oh. And you told me the story about how wonderful he is. And I'm like, hey. Do you remember that?
he just started crying in the service, and I didn't know him.
Mhm.
He said,
You
I've
touched him.
done something so bad, and I'm like, God, and I literally had my hand on his shoulder the whole service, and he's sobbing, and I'm like, I could use a little help here.
And I'm in front of her going, ooh, this is
And it
weird.
happened 2 different Sundays.
Yeah.
And he comes in last second, like 10 minutes after the service starts, sits right next to me both times. And I'm like, what a sign on here? I don't feel very confident. in
But we
this.
do, we judge. I mean,
Miguel, that was his name.
Yeah.
Was he confessing in a way or repenting?
He
or-
wanted to,
Who's being
But
convicted?
it's-
and
Yeah.
he just felt like he could not be forgiven for whatever he did.
Right.
And he did not tell me what it.
Right.
I texted him for a couple of years back and forth, and then I finally haven't heard from him. in a
I didn't
long
mean to
time.
go off topic, but it's just a perfect
No,
example
it's a perfect.
of
Yeah.
where she knew something I didn't know. And because
I
of that,
kind of judged him, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of nervous.
And I think that's what Paul's hitting the Jews with, because they're prejudging the Gentiles, the thems, because you're not chosen, you're not a descendant of Abraham, you're not this, you're not
You
this,
don't
you're not
think
that.
the way we think.
Yeah, you don't think the way we think. You don't do what we do. We don't. You eat pork. I mean,
God doesn't look at you, he looks
Yeah.
at me.
and,
you
and
can't
we're,
possibly.
and we're
decide.
like going, yay, Paul, yay, Paul. But you think about the Jews, that must have been really hard
It was
for them to let go of.
right. We get to Romans 10. He'll talk about what his hope is for the Jews.
I'm not sure they still have.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But it must be really hard to,
Mhm.
I mean, it's hard for us.
Yeah, it's hard for us. It's hard for us because we already know it all.
We know more
We
than
have the end of the book.
we know more than they do.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
Right. Yeah. And you get the application later in Romans, and that very thing is
Mhm.
each has a measure of faith,
Right.
and you got to be careful because they may not have the faith that you have yet. That takes time.
Yeah.
So, all right. And the third question here. If not circumcision, what sign should be our testimony that we are under this new covenant?
The fruits of the spirit. If you could, or Micah 6:8, take your pick.
That's the walk justice,
Yeah.
do justice,
Love mercy.
Yeah. Yeah. It ought to be evident in our life.
Be the light. Be the light.
Be the light. You got a T-shirt that says that.
You do.
Yeah, wear it all the time. It reminds me, don't be so dark. Yeah, it should be. There should be evidence of our faith. It should come out in our lives. Remember, we define the gospel's death, burial, resurrection, and appearance. There should be evidence in our life. Let's take a little side trip, shall we? And just grant a little perspective in this point.
You want me to read?
Yes, please.
O foolish man, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is worthless? Was not our father Abraham justified by what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith was working with his actions, and his faith was perfected by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. As you can see, a man is justified by his deeds and not by faith alone.
Wait a minute. This is James. This is the leader of the church in Jerusalem. Seems to be totally opposite, right? Is it? Is it totally opposite?
No.
No. Why not?
Because you said no.
I did say no. Oh, because I think if you are
Of faith.
of faith, your deeds will be good. Not that you're working to do good deeds, but they will
There
just
will be
come
evidence
naturally.
of
Yes,
the faith. Yeah. Is that what James is talking about?
I think so. I think so.
Or is James still clinging to this Jewish tradition of righteousness under the law, obeying the law, doing all the festivals, doing all the fasting, doing all the tithing, doing all
Let me
the,
check.
you're gonna check? Okay.
No, I don't, I think,
Yeah,
I agree with Nancy, that if you have faith, maybe all your deeds aren't good, but that should be your life. It's
I'm
not
trying to be obedient to what God is saying to you.
right.
I think he helps himself by the last word.
Alone.
Yeah. Well, that's what Paul preaches. By Christ alone, in faith alone in Christ alone.
Oh, that sounds
That's
like a
how we're
song.
saved. I think James is looking at something, Paul talked about salvation as being a past, present, or future. I was saved. I'm being saved through sanctification, and I will be saved in this glorification that's promised yet. And I think James is hitting that middle part as we work it out, as we work out our salvation, as Paul, the phrase Paul uses.
Well, and Abraham, didn't you just point out, he was to be blameless. So that's the working it out.
Right. Right.
my notes say faith creates works, works perfect faith.
Right, we have the definitive
I
answer.
like the Bible.
I've heard it said it's faith which works.
Oh, that's good.
I like
Faith,
that.
what?
Which works.
Which one? So how does that perspective, James' perspective here, pose a challenge? Think about it in terms of as Christians or in the church, how does someone maybe reading this really focus on verse 24? And maybe pose a challenge for how they understand God and salvation. And
That's the verse they read when they say what you said, Larry, about, I hope he grades on a curve.
because it's too simple if it's just by faith. I got to work it out. I gotta do my part. I gotta be righteous.
But I don't think we're challenged enough to do that. We become stagnant. We just drift along.
Complacent, yeah, very much so. I told you about the guy that Bob said I went to who prayed that he would be less comfortable. And he was a physician, so I mean, he did okay financially and all that kind of stuff. But he understood that was something about himself, that he would be in this place of complacency of, I can take care of my future needs. I can take care of my family. I. Where's your faith? Where's God at work in you? And he was very, very conscious of that. And it really bothered me at the time because I didn't make as much money as a doctor. And that's easy for you to say.
It's that line in the song, if more of you means less of me.
Take everything.
Take everything. Yeah, that's a hard one to pray, right? I think we probably already hit this. How does this resolve in your own walk? Are you challenged by that? About what do I have to do in my Christian walk? Do we become legalistic? Do we become judgmental? Do we become, limiting? Because we have to work this out. We have to follow these rules. We're not supposed to be obedient. I mean, right? Even Jeff said that today about being obedience. That was the first step in joy, right? Is obedience. But that's not what saves us. Different perspective.
So go back to your original question about the new believer.
Okay.
How do you deal with that?
How do you deal with that? That's a good question. And that's something I think we all have to. Paul's going to have some advice for us later, but you already know the answer, so why don't you just share it?
No, I'm not sharing it. Could be wrong.
I think part of it is
wrong answers.
part of it is we have to understand some humility. And I think that's one of the things Paul's getting at when he's talking to these Jewish believers. Yes, you're chosen, and yes, you have the law, and yes, you boast in God and your chosenness and the special and this descendancy from Abraham and all of these things. But you gotta have a little humility. Not everybody has that same experience. Not everybody has that same understanding. Not everybody has that same faith. And we just have to be a little more humble in our expectations of each other. Now, in Acts 15, they had this council, right? Where this question was decided, should they have to be circumcised and obey the law? And what was the answer? We didn't read it in class because it was too long, but what was the recommendation that James recommended? What was the council's recommendation to be sent out to the churches?
They did not have to follow the law or be circumcised, but they needed to live morally and wasn't it also remember the poor?
Yeah,
remember the poor saints.
Morally, give to the poor, and then not do 4 things.
Yeah.
And that was idols, the way meat's prepared, the blood, don't consume blood, and there was one other. These were the things that were most abhorrent to Jews. And if you're gonna worship together in the same room, and there's differences, have a little respect, have a little humility, have a little, I will refrain so that you're not offended. And that was sort of the recommendation that came out of that. Paul's going to hit some more of that in how we deal with that within the body. He'll say some have a faith enough that they can eat meat they buy at the market that may have been offered to idols, and others don't. Well, if you're convicted that you don't. But if you're convicted that it's okay, then eat it. Just don't do it in front of each other. Don't do it where you're going to cause someone to stumble.
I will refrain so that I don't offend you. That's an interesting
Right.
comment.
Yeah. Give away for later in the study. But the one he calls to act is not the one that's weak. It's actually the one who's strong in faith, the one who has the strength. They're the ones that say, I have a choice. I can eat it or not eat it. It's okay if I eat it. I'm not convicted about that, but I have a choice. But the one who's convicted about whether to eat that meat or not doesn't really have a choice. If this is convicting me, I cannot eat it. I don't have a choice.
Right.
So the one who's strong is the one that must yield. The one who has more is more spiritual is the one that requires more humility. And to say, I'm going to put you first and not me. And that's sort of, I think, how Paul resolves that question.
This idea of being challenged in our Christian life. I'm old enough to remember when we had testimony meetings,
Yeah.
and a Christian might stand up and say, I'm saved, sanctified, and satisfied. Should we be satisfied? Which, as we're talking, we shouldn't be satisfied. We should be growing.
Satisfied in the sense that God meets all my needs,
Yes.
but not satisfied as that I'm done.
Mhm.
Yeah. We continue to work it out. Yeah. Okay. And the question is, do we go on to this next one that's pretty short? How do you feel about that? Yes. The answer is yes. All right, so how does the gospel fulfill the law? Circumcision, we talked about that. A sign, it's a reminder of that promise that salvation is through faith, not a circumcision of the face, but a circumcision of the heart. The Spirit performs, not something we do ourselves. We talked about the name change that indicates this a physical change that represents a spiritual reality. And that brings us to this question. How does the gospel address our universal condition? What is our universal condition?
We're sinners.
We're sinners. So how does the gospel address this?
Gets us a way out. I was short.
Yeah, let's stay to one.
We're done. Boy, I had a lot on that summary, which we don't need to do. The precondition for this new covenant is not our descendants from Abraham. Rather, it's our descendants from Adam. And the part of the argument will conclude in chapter 5, where Paul compares Adam and Jesus. But first, he wants us to understand how being a descendant of Adam highlights our shared condition. But he's talking about the Jews. So he's got to kind of address this issue of chosenness and why they were chosen. So here we are. I think I said, yeah, back to you.
Okay.
What
What advantage then is there in being a Jew, or what value is there in circumcision? Much in every way. First of all, the Jews have been entrusted with the very words of God.
So he just said that the Jewish chosenness doesn't matter under this new covenant. The law doesn't matter under this new covenant. It doesn't save. It doesn't do anything for you. So why? Why did God do this? Why did he choose Abraham? Why are the Jews there? And what value is there in this sign? And he's fixing to tell us. For one, that's how God chose to reveal himself. So that's a huge advantage for them as a people, because they understand through their history and through their prophets and through their literature, they understand more about God, the true God, than perhaps a Gentile would. So that from a starting place, we would say in human terms, they're a step ahead. In spiritual terms, they're at the same place. But they think they have a starting place.
What if some were unfaithful? Will their unfaithfulness nullify God's faithfulness? Not at all. Let God be true and every human being a liar, as it is written, so that you may be proved right when you speak, and prevail when you judge.
Interesting that that quote is from Psalm 51. And we know Psalm 51 is where David confesses, and we read it this morning, in fact, create in me a clean heart. Even though we've failed, even though that we're all unfaithful, David has faith that God will, in fact, create in him a clean heart, that he will forgive, that he will provide a way for this restoration. And I just found it interesting that that's where Paul goes when he's talking about how you've had this covenant and you failed it. And your name is, and God's name is blasphemed because of you, that their history. It has an advantage. And the advantage that you have is you have the faithfulness of God in your history. And that God will be proved right. He will still be faithful. He will still save. He still has the power and the desire and the will to save. And he goes to Psalm 51 to quote that. I just found that interesting. Next one.
But if our unrighteousness brings out God's righteousness more clearly, what shall we say? That God is unjust in bringing his wrath on us? I'm using a human argument. Certainly not. If that were so, how could God judge the world? Someone must argue, if my falsehood enhances God's truthfulness and so increases his glory, why am I still condemned as a sinner? Why not say, as some slanderously claim that we say, let us do evil that good may result? Their condemnation is just.
Have you ever heard that? Yeah. I'm going to hell anyway. I might as well live like it. You know, you might hear it from that perspective. But yeah, if God's going to save us anyway, and all I have to do is say, you know, come into my heart, then why do I worry about any of this stuff? Why don't I just go about it? I think Paul anticipates these kinds of arguments, and they're absurd when we on the surface as we read them. But I think Paul's just going to say, look, this isn't. You're not looking at this in the right way. Yes, God is just, and we are guilty, and we deserve the righteous judgment, the same judgment we might wish on our enemies. No, we're guilty. We're all guilty. None of us are righteous, and he'll make that point here in a minute. Next.
What shall we conclude then? Do we have any advantage? Not at all. For we have already made the charge that Jews and Gentiles are alike, are all under the power of sin, as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one.
So this is where he begins this section that's going to conclude here in chapter 3. And he's going to use Old Testament scriptures to prove his point that it's not the law. It's not circumcision. It's not the covenant. It's not the chosen people. Yes, that has a benefit because I've revealed myself through all of these things. But it's not really a benefit. Why? Well, because there is no one righteous. And it's quoting from 14:1. Now, I'm going to ask this question because this is going to come up when we get to calling and predestination here in a little bit. Does this mean that there are no righteous actions? There's no one righteous, not even one. Does that mean there's no righteous actions?
Of course not.
Of course not. There are righteous actions.
Well,
Paul
even our
himself
righteous-
says.
Even our righteous deeds are like filthy rags.
I'm sorry?
Even our righteous deeds are like filthy rags.
Right. But there's still a righteousness.
Right.
Paul talks about that in Philippians, I think is where it is, where he says, you know, he says, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees, and you know, as to the law, blameless. We have that rich young ruler where Jesus asked him, you know, have you followed the law? Everyone since birth. Yeah, there is a righteousness in a sense. It's not the righteousness that leads to salvation. It's filthy rags in that context. But there are deeds that are right. There is actions that we can take that are that reflect the character of God.
So
I
Job
mean-
considered righteous?
I'm sorry,
Wasn't Job considered righteous?
Job.
Job.
Job, yeah.
Well, what you did, putting your hand on that boy's shoulder, to me was a righteous act.
Right. It reflects the character of God. Yeah, and therefore righteous. Yeah. Right. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian
No.
to serve the poor and meet
No.
those needs and
No.
and all. And in fact, sometimes non-Christians do it better than we do, which is a sad commentary, but that's a different context. But he's gonna quote some more Old Testament passages, and we'll just kind of read through those here real quick.
There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one.
Wait a minute, you just said there were righteous acts, right? Isn't that what we just said? We did conclude that. So how can no one do good? And he's quoting those Psalms. Is it hyperbole?
Hyperbole.
Yeah, thank you. I struggle with that. Hyperbole. Yeah, is that hyperbole? Are these Psalms expressing in a literary way that, according to God's standard, none of us are there? Or does it really mean that we do nothing good? There are no righteous actions.
Is he meaning no one does good all the time?
Is it perhaps no one is faithful 100% of the time? Maybe that's what it's referring to.
Or maybe it's compared to God's righteousness. We
Or
can
compared to-
never,
Because we could never
Right,
attain
we're
that.
never to that.
so
Yeah,
maybe it's,
yeah. If he graded on the curve, perhaps, but he doesn't.
But he also says, as it is written. So does that mean past tense?
I think he's quoting the scriptures. That's what we're saying, as it was written.
I think so.
Yeah, right?
So we've got now the new covenant, so, I mean,
do we not have to be righteous?
are we free? No, I mean,
We can achieve more
we
than we
don't
could before.
have to be as righteous as they were under the old covenant or.
Oh, no. Oh, no, no, no. No, no, no. Jesus says that you will not enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're more righteous than the Pharisees. And the disciples says, well, then who can be saved? Because I'm not as righteous as the Pharisees are. How can I be more than that? Well, you're more than that because through faith you receive the righteousness of God. You're not judged by the law's righteousness.
Right.
That's where we're heading towards. But I think he's pointing
I feel like I was on that page, but.
oh, maybe I'm not hearing it right, but yeah. And the reason I made a big deal of this is because when you get to the predestination, the arguments for predestination has to do with total depravity, that man is not righteous at all in any way, shape, or form. And I think Paul clearly says, no, man can do righteous things, but they're not righteous as declared by God. And that's where we're going to get to. All right, one more.
Oh, you did? Okay. Their thrones are open graves, their tongues practice deceit. Psalm 5:9. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Psalm 143. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery mark their ways, and the way of peace they do not know. There is no fear of God before their eyes.
So again, this litany of things that Paul wants to drive the point home and using the Old Testament scriptures to do it. There is something special about Jewishness. In fact, they had the very words of God that has value. God revealed himself through this. And he has a heart for his brethren, and we'll continue later in chapter 10 to see that. But he's driving home this point, and this is the point.
Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law, Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin.
So Paul expresses the obvious conclusion. The law, good as it was, has no power to save. Indeed, it's only for our conviction. But Jew or Gentile, slave or free, rich or poor, we are all under the same sentence. We are guilty. We have stored up wrath for ourselves in the day of judgment. We read that earlier. We cannot save ourselves. Even the law cannot do that. And then what I highlighted, because our standard isn't the law. Our standard is God. It's his righteousness. And by that standard, no one's righteous. Which I think is where you were headed, right? Yeah. But it's through faith where we receive the righteousness of God. That is what saves us. So that's the question we tried to answer here. So if the law doesn't have any power to save, then does any moral code, worldview, practice, or faith tradition, or cultural norms, does any of that save? The obvious answer there is no. And that's not what saves. So then the question is, can you make a compelling response to the person who says, there are many paths to God? Islam, Buddhism, humanism. So now what's your compelling response to that?
Death, burial, resurrection, and presence. None of those people died and were resurrected.
No, none of them were.
None of them created the earth.
Well, in Islam, yes, but yeah, the others
Oh,
don't.
is that, do they think that?
Yeah.
That's not the right answer.
I don't know if it's the right answer or not. I'm asking the question. I don't know. I'm hoping you'll enlighten me.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Right. It's very exclusive.
What did she say? I didn't hear her.
I'm the way, the truth, and life.
Nobody comes.
Yeah,
to
nobody
me
comes to
except-
Father but through me. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. There aren't many paths to God. There's one.
All right.
Let's see, I have the, how's that go? The needle, there's a camel or something?
Came on the needle and the
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Road to hell's paved with good intentions. So, yeah. So all of these have rules. All of these have traditions. All of these have moral codes. All of these have spiritual practices. All of these have
laws.
Normative behavior. But that's not what saves us. It didn't save the Jews. They had the law too. They had traditions too. They had a moral code as well. They had spiritual practice as well. None of those saved. And so I think the compelling argument is this is not how we're saved, because we're never good enough. It doesn't matter which of these you follow, you're not good enough.
Yeah, you'll make a mistake. You won't be able to do it
They
consistently.
don't deal with the sin problem.
Right. They don't solve the problem. It's faith alone in Christ alone. And then, can we claim any righteousness of our own? And that obvious, another obvious answer. Yes, we can claim a righteous act, but not true righteousness, because that's only through faith. Okay.
I got one. I'll give it to you.
Well, I'm glad we squeezed that in. That'll cut a week off our time.